Almost every culture on Earth tells the same story. A massive flood, civilization wiped out, only a handful of survivors. But here's what they don't tell you. This isn't mythology, it's memory. Something catastrophic happened to our ancestors. Something so devastating that 5,000 years later, we're still asking how it happened and why. We finally have answers. Sit back, because what you're about to learn changes everything. Before we dive in, hit subscribe. This channel digs into the historical mysteries that make you question everything you thought you knew. You're going to want to stick around for this one. Most of us only know the Noah version, the ark that carried 2 of every animal on Earth, 40 days of rain, a dove with an olive branch. Most people think that's where the story starts. It doesn't. In 1872, a British museum curator named George Smith was translating ancient Babylonian tablets when he found something that made him strip his clothes off and run around the room. Seriously, his colleagues wrote about it. He'd discovered the Epic of Gilgamesh, and buried in the middle was a flood story that predated the Bible by at least 1,000 years. The hero's name was Utnapishtim. The god Ea warns him that the other gods plan to flood the world. He was told to build a huge boat, loaded with his family, animals, and craftsmen who knew how to rebuild civilization. The flood comes, everything drowns. When it ends, Utnapishtim sends out birds to find land. First a dove, then a swallow, then a raven. When the raven doesn't return, he knows there's dry ground somewhere. The parallels aren't subtle. Victorian England freaked out. If the Bible borrowed from Babylonian myths, what did that mean about divine inspiration? Churches scrambled to explain it. Meanwhile, archaeologists kept digging and finding older versions. The Sumerians had Zusudra, even earlier than Utnapishtim. Same story, different name. The scholars started looking beyond Mesopotamia. The Hindu Puranas describe Manu, warned by a fish that a flood will destroy the world. He builds a boat, survives, and repopulates the earth. The ancient Greeks told of Deucalion and his wife Pyrrha, sole survivors of Zeus's flood, landing on Mount Parnassus. Chinese records speak of Gunyu, battling catastrophic floods. Norse mythology describes the world drowning in the giant Ymir's blood. Go to the Americas. The Hopi, Cherokee, Aztec, and dozens of other indigenous nations have flood myths. In Australia, Aboriginal peoples tell of waters covering the land. Pacific Islanders across Polynesia, Melanesia, Micronesia all have variations. African tribes, Persian texts, anthropologists have cataloged over 500 distinct flood traditions from cultures spanning the globe. Now, floods happen. Rivers overflow, storms surge, tsunamis hit. But these stories don't describe local disasters. They describe the end of the world, water covering mountains, near total extinction, a cosmic reset button. And here's the thing that should make your skin crawl. Most of these cultures never met each other. The Aboriginal Australians weren't swapping stories with Babylonian priests. The Mayans never encountered the ancient Hebrews. Yet they all remember the same catastrophe. How is that possible? For most of history, scholars treated flood myths as just that, myths. Interesting cultural artifacts, maybe some confused memories of local disasters, nothing more. Then archaeologists started finding things that didn't fit that comfortable explanation. In 1929, Leonard Woolley was excavating the ancient Sumerian city of Ur in southern Iraq. He dug down through layers of civilization, pottery and buildings and trash heaps, the normal archaeological sandwich. Then he hit something bizarre. 8 feet of clean, sterile clay, no artifacts or human presence, just water-deposited sediment. Below that clay, more civilization. It was like someone hit pause on human history, flooded everything, then hit play again centuries later. Woolley thought he'd found Noah's flood, but he hadn't. He'd found evidence of a massive regional flood in Mesopotamia around 2900 BCE, devastating, civilization ending for the people who lived through it, but localized. As archaeology advanced through the 20th century, though, a pattern emerged. Catastrophic flooding events all over the world, clustered around the same general period in human history, the end of the last ice age. Picture Earth 20,000 years ago. Massive ice sheets, over a mile thick in places, covering huge chunks of the northern hemisphere. Canada buried under ice, northern Europe under glaciers. So much water locked up in frozen form that sea level sat about 400 feet lower than today. You could walk from Siberia to Alaska on dry land. Britain and France were connected. Indonesia was part of mainland Asia. The Persian Gulf didn't exist, just a river valley where people lived. Then, around 14,000 years ago, it started warming up. The ice began melting. And when a mile of ice melts, that water goes somewhere. Sea levels didn't rise smoothly. They rose in pulses, catastrophic surges when ice dams failed or massive glacial lakes suddenly drained. Imagine living in a coastal settlement. Your family's been there for generations. And over a few weeks or months, you watch the ocean swallow everything. Your home, your friends, your ancestors' graves, all gone under water that never recedes. You grab what you can carry and run for high ground. This happened repeatedly across the globe. The Black Sea flood is one of the best documented. Around 5600 BCE, the Mediterranean broke through what's now the Bosphorus Strait and poured into the Black Sea basin. Marine geologists William Ryan and Walter Pittman calculated that water flooded through at 200 times the volume of Niagara Falls. The Black Sea shoreline advanced about a mile per day. If you were living there, you'd wake up one morning, see the water closer, and by nightfall, your village would be gone. Underwater surveys of the Black Sea floor have found ancient shorelines, now under 500 feet of water. They've discovered structures that were clearly built on dry land, now deep underwater. People lived there. Then the water came. The survivors fled to surrounding highlands, carrying their trauma with them. The Persian Gulf was a river valley until about 8,000 years ago. Archaeologist Jeffrey Rose argues this might have been where Eden mythology originates, a fertile valley, perfect for early agriculture, inhabited for thousands of years. Then sea level rise drowned it. The survivors scattered to Mesopotamia, to the Arabian interior, remembering the paradise they'd lost. Off India's coast, marine archaeologists have found submerged settlements. Same in Southeast Asia, where an entire subcontinent called Sundaland, almost the size of India, went underwater as seas rose. The Missoula floods around 15,000 years ago in North America were some of the largest floods in Earth's history. When Glacial Lake Missoula's ice dam failed, it released more water than all the world's rivers combined, flowing for 6 weeks. It carved the channeled scablands of Washington state in days. Indigenous peoples there still tell stories of great floods that match the timeline. Between Britain and continental Europe, there was once a land called Doggerland, lived in with settlements and hunting grounds. Now it's the floor of the North Sea. We've found tools and weapons down there. Around 6200 BC, an underwater landslide off Norway triggered a massive tsunami that swept across Doggerland. Any survivors watched their entire world vanish in hours. Here's the part that should blow your mind. These events happened 5,000 to 15,000 years ago. Humans didn't have writing for most of that period. The alphabet wouldn't be invented for thousands of years. So how did the memories survive 500 generations? Story. Stories repeated exactly, year after year. Because in oral cultures, if you forget, it's gone forever. Australian Aboriginal oral traditions contain verifiable references to geological events from over 10,000 years ago. Stories about islands now underwater, coastlines now miles out to sea. Not vague myths. specific geographic details that match with what the land looked like during the Ice Age. Linguist Patrick Nunn has documented dozens of these stories and verified them against geological data. They're accurate. The key is ritual. Tell a story once a year in a ceremony, exactly as you learned it, with community enforcement of accuracy, and that story can survive indefinitely. It becomes more than information. It becomes an identity, the answer to who are we and why are we here. Now, imagine you're a survivor. Your entire world just drowned. Everything you thought was permanent, gone. The gods you trusted, seemingly arbitrary. You survive, but you need meaning. Why does this happen? Why were we spared? What does this tell us about reality? So, you create a story. Not to lie, but to preserve truth. The flood happened. We survived, and we are their dependents, and this must never be forgotten. Your children must know. Their children must know. The story gets refined over generations. Details shift to match each culture. Moral lessons attach, but the core remains. There was water, it took everything. We barely survived. Remember this. Strip away cultural differences and look at the common elements. Almost every flood myth contains divine warning, chosen survivors, vessel or refuge, animals saved, landing on a mountain, bird scouts, sacrifice afterward, covenant or promise. These aren't random parallels. They suggest a common origin story retold through different lenses. The warning makes sense. In many cases, water rose over days or weeks, not instantly. People saw it coming. Those who fled survived. Those who didn't drowned. The vessel is practical. You need something to ride out the water. Interestingly, many stories specify sealing with pitch or tar. That's specific maritime knowledge preserved in myth. The animals appear everywhere. Why? Because when fleeing catastrophe, you take what you need to survive after. Livestock, seeds, breeding pairs. The Ark story might be memory of refugees desperately preserving their agricultural foundation. Landing on a mountain makes geographic sense. As waters rose, high ground became refuge. Mountains became sacred precisely because they were safe during floods. Ararat, Parnassus, the Himalayas, where survivors gathered. The bird scouts show up in multiple independent traditions. Noah sends ravens and doves. Utnapishtim sends doves, swallows, and ravens. Deucalion uses doves. Why? Because if you're on water with no landmarks, birds find land. They fly out in different directions. The one that doesn't return has found somewhere to perch. This is practical navigation knowledge preserved as a religious ritual. The sacrifice afterward appears everywhere. Survivors give thanks, make offerings, establish new relationships with the divine. You've survived apocalypse. You need to make meaning from it. Promise to do better. Start over. When sea levels rose 400 feet over several millennia, they didn't cover empty beaches. They covered the most desirable real estate on the planet. River deltas, coastal plains, areas with both marine and land resources, exactly where early humans would settle. Think about where modern cities are: New York, London, Shanghai, Mumbai, Tokyo. Harbors and river mouths. Go back 10,000 years. Humans weren't stupid. They built their major settlements in the same locations, all now underwater or buried under millennia of sediment. We're looking for early human history with one hand tied behind our backs. The archaeological record is biased toward highland sites that survived. We're finding the mountain camps and inland villages, but the population centers, gone. It's like future archaeologists trying to understand our civilization, but only being able to dig in Denver because New York is underwater. Marine archaeology is expensive and difficult, but what they're finding is suggestive. Submerged settlements off India, possibly 9,000 years old. Stone structures underwater in the Mediterranean predating known civilization. Megalithic sites extending below current sea level. The knowledge lost wasn't just buildings. cultural sophistication, technological advancement, astronomical understanding, navigation techniques, medicinal knowledge. Indigenous cultures worldwide claim their ancestors knew more. That great knowledge was lost in catastrophe. Usually, we dismiss this as Golden Age nostalgia. But what if they're right? Göbekli Tepe in Turkey already challenged our assumptions. Built around 9600 BCE by people we assumed were primitive hunter-gatherers. No writing, no pottery, yet they moved 16-ton stones and carved sophisticated art. Then around 8000 BC, they deliberately buried it. Why? Some researchers speculate regional flooding and climate disruption. Many ancient texts describe a time before the flood when humanity was more advanced, when knowledge was greater. After the flood, that knowledge had to be rebuilt from fragments. The Egyptians claimed their civilization was much older than archaeology supports, founded by survivors of earlier catastrophe. Plato's Atlantis, whatever its origin, follows the same pattern: advanced civilization, catastrophic flooding, knowledge lost. But maybe we're too quick to dismiss these stories as pure fantasy. Maybe they're memories of real human experience, passed through so many generations just with facts blurred into mythology. So why care about floods from 8,000 years ago? Because it's happening again. Sea level is rising, accelerated by modern climate change. Coastal cities are planning for increased flooding. Island nations are watching their countries sink. The catastrophe our ancestors survived, we're creating a new version. And we're doing it with writing, science, satellites, computer models. We can see it coming, we can measure it, yet we struggle to act. Our ancestors didn't have that luxury. They couldn't see it coming. They just knew the world betrayed them. But they survived, and they made sure we remembered, not through fear, though that's present, through simple insistence that memory matters. And so does knowing where you come from, what you survived, what you lost. Most importantly, that knowledge is sacred. What do you think? Are flood myths evidence of real catastrophe or just coincidence? Should we take ancient stories more seriously? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you want more investigations into the mysteries hiding in plain sight, subscribe and hit that notification bell. There are more secrets waiting. Thanks for watching.